So we have a very nice group called the GELL, or which is more like the Latin American group of lymphomas. This is the GELL is their acronym in Spanish, and it's a group we formed it about several years ago, and the idea is to create data coming from Latin America, original data. So we are all in agreement that clinical trials are the epitome of research in medicine, in oncology. But most of the clinical trials truly are data coming from the United States, in which the representation of Hispanic population is very limited. A lot of the studies are coming from Europe, in which the Hispanic representation is very limited. So we felt that it was our duty at creating this group of actually creating data that is proper data from us. So we have a number of different studies that we have been running and presenting. And these studies actually are very interesting as well. So in this study specifically, what we're looking at is about 180 patients age 80 or older with a diagnosis of diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, which is the most commonly diagnosed aggressive lymphoma, and to see the outcomes of these patients and how these patients are being treated. So we saw that approximately 35% of these patients received full dose R-CHOP, which is the standard treatment in Latin America for this type of conditions. So about 2/3 got actually lower intensity treatments, either R-mini-CHOP, which is a study that was done by Spanish many years ago, but also R-CHOP with decreased doses of anthracyclines, for example. And we really didn't see major differences in terms of responses or progression-free survival or even overall survival, depending on the intensity of the treatment. So I think what we learned from that is that we could treat our patients, elderly patients, with lower intensity treatments and still get good outcomes in that specific sense. On the other hand, expectedly, as an elderly population, there's a lot of different comorbidities that these patients do have. Diabetes was probably the most common comorbidity found, and obviously that complicates things because R-CHOP or those treatments do include high doses of steroids that can actually make diabetes a little bit worse. So we need to understand that in the elderly population. Finally, there was a higher rate of death, which is to some degree expected because of the toxicities and things like that. In this case, toxicity was actually the most common cause of death in these patients, and also disease progression too. So about 40% of all the deaths were made up from disease related as well as treatment related up to some degree. So even though we're actually treating our patients with lower intensity, we still have a higher toxicity rate. So I think those are the most important take-home messages. We do continue working on this. There's a big Latin American program called ELA, which is the Latin American epidemiological data that is led by a colleague of mine, Dr. Luis Malpica at MD Anderson, and we're going to be working at really understanding more to the molecular basis, lymphomas in Hispanic populations. So very excited about that too.